All right, so I don't know how much competition there's going to be for starting jobs for the 49ers when training camp opens. I think a lot of the competition will be for just the roster spots, the backup positions. But one spot where it's bound to get a lot of attention, and it already did during the 49ers mini camp, is the kicker spot. And I do think that Jake Moody is the favorite to win that job. I have some thoughts on that, but there was something that happened on Wednesday morning in New York with the New York Jets. It sort of caught my eye, and that is that the Jets released kicker Anders Carlson, and they signed a kicker from the UFL. Is that right? The UFL's Birmingham Stallions, a guy by the name of what is his name? Harrison Mevis. So Anders Carlson, the reason I bring this up is because Carlson filled in a little bit with the 49ers last year. And then he kicked and was successful as far as field goals go with the New York Jets. Of course, since the 49ers made that change at special teams coordinator, hiring Brant Boyer from the Jets, what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have done in a lot of ways is just kind of turn over that aspect of the team to Brant Boyer. And so as a result, giving him almost carte blanche to do with special teams what he wants to do. 49ers released Tabor Pepper as a long snapper. They signed John Weeks, who is a 15-year veteran, all with the Houston Texans. They released Mitch Wishnowsky, the punter, and they bring in Thomas Morstead, who spent his last two seasons with the Jets. And then they did bring in a kicker to compete with Jake Moody, Greg Joseph, who also spent a little bit of time with the Jets last year. Also, recently, the 49ers signed a cover man on special teams, Chaz Surratt. He comes from the Jets, and then some special teams guys where they're really trying to hone in on Saran Neal from the Dolphins, Luke Gifford from the Titans, Richie Grant from the Falcons. So it kind of tells you where the 49ers are as far as special teams being an absolute disaster last season and really being responsible for, or at least having a large role in a lot of the 49ers losses, especially early in the season. So they make the switch at special teams coordinator, firing Brian Snyder, and then bringing in Brant Boyer, who served the Jets for a number of years under a number of different head coaches. So he's a respected guy, and they're going to lean heavily on him. So, my question when I saw that Anders Carlson became available is, would the 49ers sign Anders Carlson? And, last year, Carlson, he did, like I said, did pretty well as far as the field goals go, 13 of 15. However, and by the way, two of those kicks, a 55-yarder with the 49ers, a 58-yarder with the Jets. However, he did have some other issues. He wasn't good on extra points, only 12 of 15. So he missed three extra points. That's not good. And he did have a significant role in a loss to the Dolphins in overtime where he made a clutch kick, but then his assignment was to kick the ball out of the end zone. He did not get that. That was on the touch on the kickoff, the ensuing kickoff. He landed it inside the 5 yard line, which he wanted to kick it through the end zone, mishit it. Ball was returned out to the 46, and that enabled the Dolphins to send that game into overtime and then eventually win it. So, one thing to keep in mind with Carlson, and this is the reason I'm posting this, is because he did have some struggles, although his field goal percentage was high, and Greg Joseph, the current 49ers kicker competing with Jake Moody, was the guy that they signed to replace him. So using that as kind of my thought process here, I don't think the 49ers will be going after Anders Carlson because Brant Boyer already last December for the final game of the season opted to go with Greg Joseph over Anders Carlson. Joseph is 30 years old. Carlson is 27 years old. Carlson just hasn't been able to put it together. The year before, he kicked for the Packers. So we'll see what happens with him. But right now, the kicker competition is Jake Moody against Greg Joseph. And Joseph is 30 years old. He's been in the league for 6 seasons, bounced around quite a bit, played and kicked in 75 games. His field goal accuracy is pretty good at 82.3%. And then you look at Jake Moody. Well, first off, back to Joseph. We didn't see much of the kickers during the mandatory mini camp, but they did go out. And one day, it was Tuesday, was Moody's day. Wednesday was Joseph's day. Moody was 6 of 7 on his field goals, and it ranged basically from 27 yards to 55 yards, something of that nature, going back incrementally, switching hash marks from left to right. So he missed one of those kicks, and then Joseph was money, making all of his kicks. So, I'm sure there will be the horse race catalog throughout training camp of how those guys are doing. But what I would think with Moody is that last year when he struggled, and boy did he struggle. Last year he was 24 of 34 on field goal attempts. His worst day was maybe also his best day when you think about, the 3 field goal misses at Tampa Bay, the sideline skirmish or whatever you want to call it with Debo Samuel telling him to F and lock in, and Tabor Pepper being right there and those two going at it. But then he made the clutch kick that ended up winning that game for the 49ers after, of course, having 3 previous chances to widen the lead or, give the 49ers some breathing room in that game. But where Moody really struggled last year was after he came back from the high ankle sprain on his kicking leg. 49ers, after the fact, said they erred. They shouldn't have brought him back so soon. But what you saw with Moody last season was an extreme lack of confidence. And it was something that he even talked about. And I know on the 49ers Talk podcast, my thought was that I just don't know a kicker can get that back. A lot of times, kickers kind of bounce around the league a little bit before they find the spot where they can have success. I just don't know. At that point, I didn't know if Moody could have that success with the 49ers or if he needed a clean break. I mean, he came into the league with a lot of expectations, third round draft pick. And so he was always going to have that kind of target on his back of people wondering, is it uh, is it a wise move to take a kicker at that point in the draft? And I think probably the overwhelming sentiment was no. But after the 49ers had decided to move on from Robbie Gould, they needed a kicker, and Jake Moody was clearing away the best kicker in that 2023 NFL draft. So what I thought with Moody was, he needs a clean break, a fresh start. And it kind of brings me back, obviously, apples and oranges here, but it it kind of got my mind thinking about Alex Smith. Think about how his career started with the 49ers. Obviously different circumstances, but the number one overall pick, whatever it was, 7 different offensive coordinators in 7 years. He reached free agency in 2011. Everybody and everybody's mother and brother was talking about how he needed to get out of the 49ers, go somewhere else. And what happened was Jim Harbaugh came in as the 49ers head coach. He assessed the situation and he decided he wanted Alex Smith as his quarterback. And so he convinced Alex Smith that, hey, you can get your fresh start. You can get it right here by staying with the 49ers. And I kind of think that that same mentality is at play with Jake Moody in that John Lynch drafted him. Kyle Shanahan's been his head coach, but Kyle Shanahan is very much a hands-off coach when it comes to special teams. By bringing in Brant Boyer and then surrounding Moody or whoever the kicker ends up being with a new long snapper and a new holder, you're kind of creating that fresh start. And I do think it's going to be Boyer's call all the way, who gets that nod as far as who the kicker is. And so from that sense, the 49ers, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan are kind of washing their hands a little bit of the pressure of having a third round draft pick as a kicker, and maybe riding with him because they have to justify that pick. I think now entering the third season in the league, 49ers don't feel that obligation to keep Jake Moody around just to keep him around. And they're going to put that decision on the shoulders of Brant Boyer. The one thing with Moody that I just like to point out is his first miss in the NFL was the kick against the Browns in Cleveland that could have won that game. 49ers were undefeated at that point in the season. And, for those people, and I've seen it said, Moody's not a good clutch kicker. Um, I, I push back on that a little bit, or maybe even a lot, because yes, he missed that kick. But, talking about that kick against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm not sure there was a bigger kick as far as the pressure of that regular season game last season. But also, let's go back to the Super Bowl. And yes, he had an extra point blocked in that game. But also, after that extra point was blocked, he hit a 53-yard field goal under the 2 minute warning of that game. And that gave the 49ers a 3 point lead, which of course was relinquished when the Chiefs scored late in that game to send it to overtime. But before that 53-yarder, Moody also got the scoring started with a 55-yarder in the Super Bowl. So in the Super Bowl, he hit kicks from 55 yards, 53 yards, including that clutch kick, 53 yards with less than 2 minutes remaining. And he also had a chip shot, 27-yarder in overtime that gave the 49ers the lead. So it's not like he's just completely folded every time there's been a clutch kick. I don't think that there's been any more pressure on a kick than what he experienced in the Super Bowl with 153 remaining in that game. So that's kind of the rundown of where the 49ers are with their kicking situation. Moody has adjusted his approach to kicking, kind of tightened it up a little bit instead of, I don't even know exactly how to describe it other than, maybe not a three-step approach to the kick. It's more 2.5 steps, so it's more compact, and it doesn't look like he's sacrificing too much power in order to make that adjustment, just to control it a little bit better, get his accuracy more in line. So that's the rundown. Anders Carlson, who kicked a little bit for the 49ers last year when Moody was injured, is on the market. He's available, but seeing how Brant Boyer with the Jets last year had already made that decision to go with Greg Joseph for the final game of the season over Carlson. I don't expect there to be a change there. And I do think that it'll be Jake Moody against Greg Joseph for the job. I believe that Moody is the favorite, but it's also, I think that, right now these guys are on kind of equal footing as far as, no one having the significant edge where the 49ers are, pretty much it has to be Greg Joseph very clearly in order for him to win the job. I do think that the best person will get it. That's leg strength. Maybe this year the touchback doesn't become such a big thing on kickoffs because the ball will be put out 5 yards further to the 35-yard line. So there are two kickers in on the 49ers 90-man roster competing for that job. They did have the Lou Groza Award winner as the best kicker in college football. He's from the University of Louisiana, Kenneth Almendarez, and he was on a tryout basis at the rookie minicamp, so they had him in there. Kenneth Almendarez, and he did not get a contract offer, so he remains a free agent. He is not with the 49ers. He had a tryout, but that was it. And so therefore, it is Greg Joseph against Jake Moody. So that's the quick rundown on Kicker Watch 2025. And thanks for watching this video. And that is it for now.